Welcome back to Multidimensional March. Today's day 9. Now, if you're familiar with dragon magic, you know that 9 is a very important number in relation to the dragon path. I'm not going to be talking about dragon magic today, but I think it's interesting just to state that while starting off with this topic. How do we immortalize ourselves throughout time? We've got to become a story, a lived story. A lot of people from the past, they don't embody the traditions. Okay, they learn about the traditions, they keep it mental, but they're not living through them. They're not being the superhero that they want to be. They don't have access to these secret archetypes or secret codes that you can take from an ancient wisdom and apply it directly to your modern life. Okay, my name is Sumedh Chatterjee. I'm a founder of the Flow Zone Academy. I'm co-founder of Primal Sutra, and I am here to help you feel your best and perform your best. My obsession is the flow state. That is my magnum opus. That is what I'm most passionate about, and I'm teaching from that angle. So you got to know that before I begin. Okay, I'm teaching from that liminal space where everything connects, and there are all these synchronicities, and time stands still for you in that space. Okay, so starting off, let's start talking about storytelling. To be a good storyteller, you have to have a good, interesting story to tell. Okay, you have to understand that once you are a storyteller, you're not only allowing yourself to tap into your purpose by telling your story, but you're also adding to somebody else's purpose through storytelling. Okay, because through a story, people can resonate with a structure of a lesson or a moral or something that can be highly contextualized or categorized in such an easy way that you can directly pull from that fantastical storybook narrative world, because this is all narrative. If you've ever studied narrative therapy, it's very interesting in terms of understanding our life like a story timeline, like a storyboard. Okay, so we can't force someone with a message like, oh, do this or have this kind of lifestyle. Okay, immediately from tomorrow you're going to pick up this book and start reading it every single day. Okay, we're usually not as open to that as let's start exploring, let's become curious like children, let's start learning something new, right? You know, a lot of these ideas that I'm going to be mentioning have been almost manipulated with. The information has been derived in such a way that it's not been pure to its teachings, okay? So I want to be conscious of that as I'm teaching you. I don't want you to think like I'm some guru or some kind of, mentor that has it all figured out. This is from my own lineage, my own teachings, and what I'm learning and coming across that will really help you make some tweaks in your mystical mind so that you can apply it very readily and directly into your life. And that's exciting to me. So a lot of people in India, when they hear the word Tantra, they associate it immediately with black magic, okay? When people in the West hear of Tantra, they just think of it, oh, it's just sex, right? Now, Tantra is actually philosophy, and I don't think that people start to understand that, the tantric understanding of merging or union, right? And the fact that we have all this pleasure inside of us, this Shakti energy inside of us, this feminine energy this Devi energy, right? That can rise and allow you to express itself in many different ways. So it cannot become, it's like, how you can't work out, you can't spot reduce, right? As they say in the gym, like you can't zoom into one body part and just kind of focus on that. You have to work out this whole entire system around it, right? And so that's kind of similar in terms of this stuff, okay? So you have to learn things around it to kind of get the right context. So you can have the Taoist understanding from Mantak Chia, but then you apply the tantric teaching and then it's like, boom, it's a new sacred science of itself, right? It's a new philosophy where two art forms are merging into a third point, as I was talking about yesterday, right? The third point of creation. So now I want to speak a little bit about the classic understanding of the Kama Sutra that has been kind of bastardized in a sense. I don't want to use that word. Let me just boil down to a different essence, right? Because mainly in a Victorian England, you know, having a sex book with positions sounds very enticing, right? It sounds taboo, it sounds forbidden, it sounds, you know, interesting to go into. And it's very hush-hush, right? It's almost like he had to create his own secret society, the Society of Kama Sutra, in order to continue publishing these works. You get what I mean? So it was he made it into his own thing. And of course, everything becomes modified. For instance, Bikram, who came actually from this part of India, and then he went to the West, right? He brought those teachings. And you know how they have a hot room in Bikram? Here in India, we just don't have air conditioning. You get what I mean? So it is that hot when we practice yoga. So it's not something trendy here, where it's like, oh, I'm going into this hot room. But it's trendy in the West because you're pushing your physical body to a temperature that is just unbearably scorching, right? But for us Indians, it's not unbearably scorching. You get what I mean? Like, we're doing yoga in that heat. And so giving you that context, just that understanding, right? And again, that is a story. Again, how you choose to interpret that story is what is so magical from it. What you learn from it, not just, you know, everyone learns something different from these stories, right? It's not what you particularly want to learn from it, but it's like what you want to learn in general, right? So now we understand that, you know, of course there's these understandings, like, you know, when I had white hair, like it's an understanding that if you have white hair, it's like the moon is reflecting, they see the full moon in you, in a sense. So it causes more of that superstition of the darkness and black magic and Tantra and things like that, right? And so, like, I was purposefully, I guess, going into that creation because I'm not going to be held down by morals and codes and things which don't serve me in my life. Of course, I'm a very moralistic man, an ethical man. However, I'm not going to be held down and told that sex is a sin, okay? And I'm telling you why, because the word sin in archery means that you just missed your mark. It's not something of a label that ruins your whole life, you see? And a lot of people, they label them. So how do you free yourself of something? You give it a different label, okay? And that's what they did, you know, back in the day. They had to get rid of sex just for pleasure, and so they labeled it as a sin. Boom. And now there's this kind of dirtiness or cruelty or this kind of nastiness associated with the erotica, whereas it's actually this very beautiful, fulfilling thing and heart-opening thing, right? And so we got to understand how to balance out that curiosity with the sinful nature of this thing. We have to redraft our understanding of why it was made to be a sin, okay? If we go back to the text of Kama Sutra, okay? Kama meaning pleasure or desire, and Sutra meaning treatise or, you know, protocol or method or, you know, workbook, okay? And I mean, the same way we have Primal Sutra, right? Which is our understanding of, you know, going back to the origin point, going back to the point of creation. You know, we have to ground in order to ascend. I mean, that was our entire idea, is we need to go down to the roots of hell in order to rise up and ascend to heaven. And we have this whole undersoul and oversoul idea, okay? Where we're exploring the undersoul, but also the oversoul, the higher self, and the lower self is being understood, is being self-realized, is being self-actualized, right? And so, you know, it's interesting, in the Kama Sutra, they have these different archetypes of women, right? And now I don't believe in categorizing women or anything like this, but the way that they were categorized is very interesting. Like they had one called, I believe it was called Padmini or Padmani, where this woman could only orgasm like at the hours of dawn, okay, or something like this. And what's interesting is they were all categorized based on what pleased them or gave them pleasure, right? And so nowadays, I guess we have a modern version of that, which is your erotic blueprint, which they tried to explore through that show, right? Sex, Love, and Goop or whatever on Netflix, right? That's the best kind of understanding we have. But then again, imagine what all is left out of that matrix. You get what I mean? From the Kama Sutra all the way back to the modern version in the West that's been introduced as a form of a quiz, there's a lot that's left out. You guys get that? Like in that spectrum of information, there's a lot that's just been chopped down. So once we understand these archetypes, we can resonate with them perhaps. Like for instance, they split them up in terms of where they found arousal in different environments. You get what I mean? So like certain people are more aroused by the seaside. Certain people are more aroused by like being in the woodlands or maybe in the forest, right? And so depending on the archetype, it was also very location based, okay? Or locus centric. So if you understand that sex is just stories, right? It's just fantasy. And if you have a good understanding of fantasy or these fantasy worlds that are being created, and just like, you know, we have porn that's more highly engineered towards the male gaze, we also have female erotica, right? Novels and things like that. But then we also have celebrity gossip, which is equally as addicting, right? And you get trapped into the cycle of this vacuous information that keeps coming at you, like ba 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 ba. Oh, this person is with this person. Oh, this person cheated on them, and they did that, and oh, this scandal is happening behind the scene, right? It's this same dopamine spike or this understanding that's happening with these, you know, celebrity information that a lot of people are addicted to. So understand that the earliest fantasies that were generated in you was when you were a kid, when you were in school. That's why we have the teacher-student fantasies, we have the schoolgirl fantasy. We have certain fantasies that are sexual in nature that have started from us being in a state where we're still exploring our pleasure and what it means to be a sexual organism on this planet, right? As we're younger, we're just exploring, you know, we feel aroused by certain things. Not aroused in the sense of, you know, getting a boner or having your clits hard, right? Having your nipples hard, right? I'm talking more so that feeling of pleasure within the body, the Shakti rising, right? That feeling of, whoa, it's like, usually when you're hungry, you're also horny because it's coming from the same center of the brain. You get it? And we also associate food with sex. So our brain kind of clumps everything together, okay? So a lot of times, you know, if you take the fantasy out of the equation, I mean, what are you really left with, right? I mean, in French, they call sex petit mort, or the little death, right? Petit mort. So you got to understand that, hey, someone wearing lingerie, not lingerie, okay? Lingerie. I'm just teaching the brown people, you know, who are watching how to pronounce this word. Is more to do with the fantasy, right? Like the lingerie is creating this almost this transparent essence of this lace where you can't really, you can see a little bit through it, but you can't see it all, right? And that creates this mystery, this sense of longing, right? This sense of there's parts missing, okay? And of course, it's a very poetic kind of way of understanding it, or maybe it's not a normal way of understanding, but I need to see, as an artist, as a creative, as a flow state catalyst, I notice the erotic in the simplest of things. And as you start studying psychology, you also get the same thing. Like everything kind of relates back to that, especially if you're studying Freud, in that sense, right? And you'll notice something in people's Tinder bio. Why are they putting these attributes out? I'm an adventurous person, right? I'm a sapiosexual. You know, why are they putting these personality traits out there? That's the mating call, you see? The sapiosexual is telling to somebody else that I'm attracted to intelligence. And so I'm going to put that signal out into the environment. It's an honest signal, that's what you'd say. Just like flicking your hair back like this as a woman, right? Which is called preening, which is actually, they used to study this in, it goes back to chimps, like pulling, the lice from the hair of the other chimps, right? It goes back to that primal Paleolithic times, okay? So our modern day flirting strategies, right, go back to this evolutionary psychology. And I think that that's really important to at least understand for us human beings, now that everything is going from physical to digital, where it's actually changing our narrative, right? So we have to redraft a narrative or a storyline of sex as us being the sexual archetypes or the creators in this and function within this sexual matrix to not get so trapped by what's really happening, right? Because I want you guys to really understand something, okay? The things we're attracted to is not a choice, okay? It's something that's hardwired. It's something biological happening to us, okay? Something very, very biological happening. Like you could take some medication that could make you hypersexual. You get what I mean? You could be in an environment that promulgates more hyper states of arousal, right? So, I mean, a lot of women, when you ask them what do they want in a guy, someone with a good sense of humor, someone who either takes life seriously, doesn't take life too seriously, someone who can have fun, tall, muscular man. What are they really looking for, right? Underneath all of that signals survival. Okay? To be humorous means you can connect with other tribes and be able to make the tribe grow larger. You get that? To be tall and muscular means that you can add safety and protection. No one's gonna fuck with you, right? So certain things that are very, very monumental in changing someone's impression or changing someone's value or level of respect that they have for you. And I think respect is more rare and honestly more admirable rather than seeking something like love. Because, okay, yeah, love is great and it can be very easily romanticized too. It can easily be made into a fantasy where it completely takes you off board, right? And it's, again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. You're feeling all these neurochemicals, you're getting drawn into that person. But I think that's a very female-centric thing to experience life through the lens of love. And we can experience it through the overarching love as men, as unity, but we as men are more drawn to the visual aspect of beauty, right? And that's why the whole makeup industry, that's why everything, it's all pertaining to the male gaze, right? So it's like, you got to understand that our prefrontal cortex and limbic system are coming in and going on this ancient network of sex in our brain that's coming up, that we're using Pornhub and things like that to hijack that network, that old network of sex. And so our thoughts are coming into this coding that is already imprinted within us. You get what I mean? So it's like you might be having sex, but because you're so adjusted to pornography, you're used to seeing two people doing it. So you have this almost third person perspective in a sense, right? And so you might be in the moment making love to someone, but I'm talking from, personal experience too. Like, you're making love to someone, but then you're thinking about, you're in your head creating these fantasy scenarios. Like, I want to see them from this position or that position or do this or do that. It's like you're fully in the mind. And this comes from that conditioning, that porn conditioning and the language of porn, which is harsh instead of a little bit more empathetic and soft and things you actually need to make the relationship connect and create actual genuine intimacy with someone, right? So this is what I really want you to understand, man, is that oxytocin is released to take down the aggression of the vasopressin that's being released, okay? And the reason being, okay, back in the day, we had tribes, okay? So let's say that two people in that tribe, right? A male and a female had sex, okay? Now, right after they have sex, and again, there's a reasoning to this to make the genes spread, right? So in a sense, one guy would stop having sex with this woman, and then a woman didn't have that refractory period, right? She didn't need to, in a sense, wait an entire hour before she could have sex again. Like, she's ready to go again. Where the guy is just like, oh, I'm done. Once and I'm done. And I'm explaining this kind of phenomenon to you. So as she went out, and you know, she's hanging around, the male, if the male has a sense of territorialness or possessiveness over this woman, or an ownership over this woman in some sense, he would get aggressive if another male is trying to seduce after, you know, he just smashed, right? Like he, at one level, he's like, okay, this person's getting my sloppy seconds, but also it's creating this impression, this aggression in him, created from the vasopressin that's released after ejaculation, right? So after nutting, post-nut clarity, you're like, yo, get away from her, okay? You get a little bit aggressive in that sense, to protect her, in that sense, from the baby being born or whatever, right? Like the biological dance of mating dance has happened, and now it's like the dance, the afterglow of the ritual dance that has taken place. And so in that afterglow, there's a lot of things happening. There's oxytocin also being released, which is creating bonding or closeness, right? And so the oxytocin relaxes that aggression that we have from the vasopressin. So they're almost like balancing each other out, almost like in our stomach, how we have ghrelin and leptin kind of balancing each other out, hunger and, getting produced, again, coming from the pleasure cycle, right, of dopamine. So it is this whole dopaminergic thing that's happening in terms of pleasure. However, I just want to get you this understanding to keep you more context or like guidance in this area, right? So, in a sense, you know, innocence, in a sense, right? Going back to primal, going back to basics, right, is really important. Like, your body knows how to have sex. You get what I mean? And this is what you most need to understand when it comes down to being an excellent lover or an excellent person who has this thing under control, is you want to understand that sex is like life. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's very creative, sometimes you have to, you know, use pressure, pressure on, pressure off. It's like life, okay? So you can't be 100% yang thrusting all the time, and you can't be 100% yin lover boy all the time. It's got to be a mix of a lot of different things that are happening. But all you're really doing, what you're really, really, really doing when it comes down to this act, a very erotic primal act, carnal act, right, is you're getting out of your own way. You're letting the limbic and the prefrontal kind of stop fighting with each other. You're just going, you're relaxing deeper into the belly, you're being more present. And maybe you're wiggling your toes a little bit, you're wiggling your fingers a little bit, you're getting into it, right? You're using your whole body. It's like when you fight, you know, when you punch, you have to use your entire hip into it. Just like that, when you're making love, you're interconnected. So you have to know that you have the top chakras and the bottom chakras working together to create this Shakti rise in both of you, right? And oftentimes you have to guide the dance, in a sense, as a man, okay? You have to sort of nudge the art form of the dance to take play. So let's say if it, you know, you see her face clenching up like this, you ask her, like, is it all good? Like, is there any pain? You're good to go, right? Like these little check-ins, right? With yourself, when you're masturbating by yourself, or you're just in your own space, you're not doing those check-ins with yourself. You're not with another person. So it becomes more so not this duo dance, it becomes this internal ego dance, in a sense, okay? So now it's this completely other thing, right? But our mind doesn't think so. Our mind thinks we're having sex because we aren't meant to, like, you know, I guess our brains didn't like predict that we would be masturbating, you know, like, so, and again, these topics are taboo in India, right? Again, so that's why I'm also really putting this out there, because other coaches, other leaders, trailblazers, healers, you know, shamans, mystics, they aren't talking about this stuff, okay? It's very surface level, but we need to understand how to merge that fantasy world with the reality world. So the fantasy that's created through sex, we have to bring it down into the real world in certain ways. So you have to see the erotic in the mundane and the absolutely illogical in the most bizarre, right? And laughter also creates some of this release of tension where you can get closer with someone, right? So you don't want to go into this like this is this performative, productive thing that I'm doing. It's going to happen A, B, C, D. No, you have to practice relaxing, getting into the moment, letting go of any tension, flowing through it, letting your body get naturally aroused to the you know, you really tuning into her body, all of it. Okay, understanding that don't just zoom in onto one body part like her boobs or her eyes or something like this. You know, have that whole, how would I say this? A full awareness gaze, right? Like when you're looking at her, you're looking at her in her entirety. Not just the makeup that she did that day, not just, you know, the random clothes that she's wearing that day, right? It's more so like her whole beingness, right? And so you understand when her mood is changed, she's more likely to actually be connected to you, right? So if she's mad and frustrated, she's not going to make love very well, okay? We kind of know this, okay, in a sense. We know it in the subconsciously, back in our mind. We know it from our ancestors too, right? They probably experienced something like this. Like, she's not in a good mood, not going to get any, okay? Same thing with you. If you're not in a good mood, you're not going to be performing well. If you're stressed out, you're not going to be performing well. So the main key thing here is to look for the tension and the stress in the body. Releasing those, starting with a gentle massage or starting with something very light and playful. Some foreplay, right? So the arousal can build. For guys, we get aroused very quickly, but for a woman, she needs that volume knob to raise over time. It's like a crescendo. And then sometimes it can be wave after wave, right? However, if you rush into this, like, let me quickly fast forward through this movie and thrust a bunch of times and then I'm nutting and then I'm done, you have this idea that sex is supposed to be depleting to you and depleting to your energy, whereas as actually energy giving, in a sense. You see? You're thinking that this energy is being drained from you, and you have that in the back of your mind. You know, guilt actually lowers your testosterone. You get it? And a lot of people are guilty based on their past sexual history, or maybe even sexual shame of their culture, or they feel like they're doing something dirty or something wrong. And that's the main thing that's stopping them from being like this kind of connoisseur of this sexual plethora or panoramic, you know, romantic exploration of this lover archetype in all its dimensions. You get it? Like, it's the guilt, it's the shame. So doing the trauma release and the sexual healing work is really, really key. And that's what's helped me, because I used to have a lot of, like, you know, ideas and like distortions around this topic, and, you know, a lot of confusing narratives. Again, it's about the story that we tell ourselves. Okay? So if you can change the storyline that you're telling yourself, all the old beliefs around this that's not serving you anymore, you can finally take power back over this vessel, over this spiritual experience. Because again, the Kama Sutra was a spiritual text, remember. Even though it made pleasure something very procedural and not this woo-woo like floating thing of prana, it made it something very strategic. It made it categorical. It made it linear. It made sex into a science. Okay, it only takes an Indian guy to do that, right? It's like, that's it, man. Right? Hemisync coming together, and you know, of course, the Kama Sutra is not perfect. Okay, it had a lot of weird translations and a lot of strange evidences and things that they did back in the day that aren't so relevant now. I mean, again, they kind of classified these different sex positions even through explaining jewelry, okay? So like, for instance, this example of like the jingling girdle, right? And how these girdles will like move in the body, and you know, the Abrahamic religions, they wouldn't really believe in this idea of having the woman on top, right? In terms of the lovemaking. So over time, you know, in the Kama Sutra, they actually said a very, very controversial thing, which is the woman can actually be on top. However, she's got to only use her hips, okay? She can't use her upper body much. So that's why the jewelry that was hanging, you know, it couldn't make a noise, a clinking noise like this, with the top being very activated. Like, so there's all these like little nuances and things, right? You think it's just a sex position. It's being explained through the metaphor of jewelry and the jewelry that women used to wear back in that era, back in that timeline. You get what I mean? And so then this guy comes along, you know, takes this book, tries to translate it to English and bring it to the West, and now we have all these Tantricas thinking that they're the shit, right? Running around, okay? Now, if you're a Tantrika, if you're practicing this, if you're a sexual embodiment coach, you know, I really respect that field and I respect that work. But I think it is a field that you need a lot of support and you need a lot of backing, special spiritual backing, right? If you're doing this kind of work, because it can be very dangerous too, okay? And you got to understand the dangers that come with something like that. So, you know, I keep speaking about this idea of love and how it differs anywhere, right? In positive psychology, we call it micro moments of connection, right? That's how we describe love or experience love in terms of kind of the scientific way of understanding it. Is these micro moments of connection build up. This is also the reason why proximity like creates attraction, right? The reason why arranged marriages or something like that can work in India is because of the proximity factor. If you're in a space with one person, you're more likely to bond and get close with them over time, okay? So again, it's also very scientific in a sense. I don't believe in arranged marriage, nor do I want to get into that. However, in the sense of really understanding that something is just a label away. You get that? If you're diagnosed as something tomorrow, your entire worldview has to modify to fit that narrative label. You get what I mean? You just won a trophy. Your entire system has to recalibrate in order to, how do I bring this narrative in? How do I make it mean something to me? And that's what the brain does. When something doesn't mean anything to us, we get confused and the mind reaches for it more. This is why we love to gamble. I might win, I might not win, right? That's what the mind loves to do. It loves to seek out the unknown, and it loves unanswered questions. So this is why mystery is so attractive in terms of, you know, mating, love, seduction, all these realms, right? Because if something is very concrete or set in stone, there's no longing, there's no sense of, you know, there's a direction towards it. There's no misdirection, subtle misdirection, which is the real word seduction. I mean, it means to lead astray, okay? It does not mean to, you know, inspire someone and empower them into the lifestyle that you truly deserve. No, it's like, we really have to understand the word origins of these things. And again, my mom was bringing in this moral dilemma into this question of like the seductive archetypes and things like that. She was saying that these aren't really good people, are they? Right? Like the charmer or the rake or, you know, all of these characters, like maybe like, but then even if they aren't good in a sense, right? There might be a movie character that you're watching that you might not think is very good in its nature, but there's something attractive about them. They might be the Byronic or the anti-hero, but there's still something seductive in that, isn't there? Like, we feel that we could have that freedom to act in that deluded, cocky, or that way. But we don't give ourselves the permission because it's not a part of the narrative that we're living. Everything comes down to the story that you tell yourself. And this is what I want you to understand today on day 9, multidimensional March. Go watch the other videos. They stack on top of each other, okay? This idea is so crucial that it can shift your entire world around. Because if you relate to yourself as a sexual being with a sexual nature, that you're here to do something special, that you're here to heal with your sexual energy as well, and not just give it out for free. Okay? This can heal the disconnected minds and the stress and the burnout of the planet, where we're all going into a workaholism, so there's not enough playaholism. Okay? And then I'm not saying to be a playaholic either. I mean, you have to find your in-between. You have to make the work your play, in a sense. It's that kind of, it's not a workaholism because that's not flow, right? Workaholism is not flow state. Workaholism is just you pushing and you're hiding. It's like you're bandaging something over, you're rushing past something, or there's some kind of a trauma associated with it, and it doesn't feel that good. Like you're working hard, but something is missing from your life. You get what I mean? So that's different to flow. Flow is losing your sense of time and just enjoying yourself so much that you can't even, like, is it 5:30? Like, what? You know? And I sometimes lose my track of time throughout the day. So I've got to keep myself a watch, right? I got to keep myself on the track because I'm constantly finding different ways to stay in this liminal space, in this pocket, in this zone. And as I make it more so my default, I recognize that it becomes non-functional. So I've got to amp it up even further. You get what I mean? So this is that journey. It's like you're not chasing that high, you're being it. You are activating it. It's already within you. That feeling good, that buzz within you, right? That reverberates and creates a positive energy in any environment that you interact with. That's what I'm talking about. And you have that within you. So today, what I want you to do, man, is just, or chica, I want you to just rewrite the narrative that you've given yourself. Tell yourself a different story. What is the story you would prefer to tell? Find the mess in your message and deliver it in such a way that it clarifies that what I've been through, the pain that I've been through, it is not only something for me to suppress and hide. It's a gift to the world because other people might have gone through similar traumas, you see? Other people might have gone through similar pain. And I'm actually healing the planet by sharing that story of mine. That might be causing me some distortion or inner pain, but now I've spoken it out into the physical world. Now it's gone. Now it's, there's a release of tension, but it's really a release of story. Okay? So we're all telling ourselves a story. What is your legacy? What is your story that you're leaving behind? How will you become immortal? Let's get it. Upward Spiral Gang, may we never be the same again. Hit that like, subscribe button, notification bell. You know the deal. Let's get it. Bodhidharma style, Heike style. Commitment. Let's go.